The Ontario election campaign is officially on. Party leaders made their first pitches to voters this morning.
I'm asking the people for a strong, stable, 4-year mandate to do whatever it takes to protect Ontario.
Today, Doug Ford, he quit his job as Premier. So I'm here to apply for that job.
This is Doug Ford's Ontario, and over the past 7 years, things have just gotten worse.
Doug Ford's abandoned Ontarians in their time of need.
So voters in Ontario will head to the polls on February 27th. The CBC's Mike Crawley is part of our team covering this election for us. He joins me now from Toronto. Okay, so Mike, the parties officially launched their campaigns today. I mean, day one, you sort of want to set the tone. What's this election going to be about?
Yeah, David, the launch of the campaigns really tell you a lot about the major themes that the parties are going to want to run on. And so let's start with Doug Ford and his Ontario PCs. He was in Windsor. He's surrounded by unionized workers. He's got the Ambassador Bridge right behind him in the background, and he's right there at the Canada-US border. His prepared remarks were all about the threat of tariffs and what he would do to protect Ontario. That is the PC campaign slogan. Nothing of substance, David, about any other issues. So he didn't even mention healthcare. He didn't talk about housing or really any area of provincial jurisdiction. It was all about tariffs. So if we turn to the Ontario NDP, its leader, Marlys Styles, she touched on quite a number of themes. She talked about protecting working families against the threat of tariffs, but she was also telling Ontarians they can vote to hire more doctors, to build more homes, to fix schools, to make life more affordable. And the NDP slogan is "In it for you." Stiles is projecting a lot of energy there. She's got a bunch of candidates in the background. And contrast that with what we see from the Ontario Liberal Party and its leader, Bonnie Crombie. So you've got her there looking kind of lonely, actually. She's in front of an anonymous-looking building. It turns out that that building is a medical center with some doctor's offices in it, and the candidate beside her is a family doctor. She's a former president of the Ontario Medical Association. So her message there is all very strongly focused on healthcare. But David, you know, political campaigns, they really rely on the visuals, on the image to get across or to reinforce the substance of the message. And, it's hard to see how the Ontario Liberals got that across with that today.
But Mike, it's not a normal election. It's more than a year early. The incumbent premier is running on foreign policy, and his opponents are trying to make it about, sort of the domestic issues, healthcare, and the everyday bread and butter things a provincial government deals with. So, will the tariffs, will it work? Will that be the ballot question, do you think?
Yeah, it's really an interesting question, David. I mean, tariffs, they absolutely seem to be the thing that is top of mind for people in Ontario right now as Canadians. And Doug Ford's definitely trying to capitalize on that, let's say, politically. He's trying to capitalize on this perception that there's a power vacuum in Ottawa and that he is the one standing in and standing up for Canada. You just heard Premier Furey talk, name-check Doug Ford there for his role in this. So today in Windsor, a reporter asked Doug Ford whether this election is really going to be a referendum on who is best placed to deal with Donald Trump and tariffs. Here's his response.
It's twofold here. Is leadership, and leadership. And who do you trust to take care of the people of Ontario and the businesses and the workers when times get tough? And they're going to get tough.
But, you got to wonder whether you can actually, as a provincial politician, frame something that's got to do with, cross-border trade and the diplomacy of foreign relations, as you called it, David, and the president of the U.S. Can that be the defining issue of a provincial election campaign? What about all the other things that a provincial government does that people care about? The other parties are certainly going to want to try to make, those things the issue. Bonnie Crombie of the Liberals, for instance, she wants to poke at Doug Ford's record on healthcare.
Doug Ford said 7 years ago he would fix hallway medicine. It's only gotten worse. He said he'd end wait times in hospitals. They've only gotten worse. 2.5 million people don't have access to a family doctor. Soon it'll be more than over 3 million who are at risk of losing their doctor as doctors retire.
But is the state of the healthcare system really going to break through is the issue here in 2025? I mean, in the last provincial election, 2022, a bunch of us really thought that the defining issue was going to be the Ford government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and that turned out not at all to be the case. So, look, we're going to have to see how much these other issues matter to voters right now when Canada is facing this big threat of tariffs.
Okay, Mike, always appreciate the time. That's the CBC's Mike Crawley in Toronto. Marit Styles is joining me now. Ms. Stiles, good to see you again. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, great to be here.
Doug Ford says he needs this election to send a message to Donald Trump. Do you think Donald Trump cares what happens in this election?
Well, I suspect that Donald Trump is probably looking at this chaos up here in Canada and thinking it's a good opportunity to make some trouble. But look, today, first day of the election, Doug Ford quit his job. He quit his job as Premier today. And I'm running for his job. I want to be the Premier of Ontario, and I want to form a government that's going to be on the side of Ontarians.
Okay, well, look, he's still technically Premier, even if it is in the caretaker convention of an election campaign. But whether Trump cares or not about this election, he's going to be an issue in this. He's reshaping federal politics with his threats of tariffs and damage to the economy. You said today you support a strong, tough, smart tariff response that hits back hard. How do you punch through if everybody's on the same page on how to deal with Donald Trump?
Well, I think, first of all, we need a smart tariff plan that is a unified approach and with all levels of government involved, right? And right now what we have is a couple of premiers out there freelancing for the most part, and that's not helpful. And I guess the other thing I would say is, I have a fair amount of experience at the bargaining table, negotiating with some very big American and multinational corporations. And I would say, don't give it all away before you get to the bargaining table. We have to stop negotiating with ourselves and actually put together a strong, tough plan. And then the other thing we have to do, and I think this will be part of this election as well, is, think about what life will be like for people if these tariffs do come in, and we have to help support people as they weather the storm.
Well, the legislature obviously can't convene because you're in the middle of an election campaign, and we could get hit with tariffs on February 1st. Obviously, the government will be constrained in its ability to pass legislation if there's a need to respond to this. It could, I presume, Cabinet could use special warrants and other measures to free money up. Would you be okay with them potentially doing that during an election campaign?
Well, look, like I said, Doug Ford certainly decided today to, I would say, quit. I mean, he has technically really stepped aside today, and he's just made a decision, I think an irresponsible decision, to go to the polls. But I see this as an opportunity. I see this as an opportunity to talk about turning the page on Doug Ford and the Conservatives. And, if they were to try to do something like that, we'd look at whatever they were proposing, certainly, depending on the situation. But, I think a lot of Ontarians today are asking themselves, is my life any better after Doug Ford, after 7 years of Doug Ford and the Conservatives? And life is really tough in Ontario right now, and I think that is going to be a key issue in this election. It's
quite the way to give yourself an advantage, though, in an election campaign, isn't it? To close the legislature, but still reserve your executive authority to spend money to respond to a crisis. I've never seen anything like that happen in an election campaign. It seems like it would be a bit unfair, potentially.
Well, I agree with you. And I think also, nothing seems to be stopping this government from spending, like drunken sailors over the last few weeks with the Ontario taxpayers' money. But that's Doug Ford and the Conservatives, right? They have spent so much Ontario taxpayer money over the last 7 years. And what have we got? We've got 2.5 million Ontarians without a family doctor. We have a province that has the lowest housing starts in the country. We have skyrocketing rent, skyrocketing cost of everything. I mean, this is the legacy of Doug Ford and the Conservatives. And so I don't trust them for a second. And I got to tell you, I think Ontarians are going to see this election for what it is, which is Doug Ford trying to pull one over on the people of Ontario. And so I'm saying, look, if he's going to pull this on us, let's use this as an opportunity to turn the page. Let's turn the page. Let's hire doctors. Let's build housing. Let's fix our schools. Let's make life more affordable. And my goodness, let's turn the page on Doug Ford and the Conservatives and elect a new government.
So he's running on the issue of Donald Trump, the slogan of Protect Ontario. We saw Bonnie Crombie, the Liberal leader, out with her own novelty hat, focusing on making health care a core part of her campaign. What is your pitch to the voters of Ontario that separates you from the Liberals and the PCs in this?
Yeah. So my pitch to Ontarians right now is we need a government that's on your side. Life has never been more difficult. As I just mentioned, we have record number of Ontarians without a family doctor, 2.5 million Ontarians without a family doctor. We have people being treated in hallways, hallway medicine that started under the Liberal government, and then the Conservatives here poured gas on the situation. We have schools that are not supporting our kids, education workers, healthcare workers struggling. The cost of everything is through the roof, and rent is outrageous, right? So we have to start to do things differently. We have a plan. We're going to be hiring more doctors, addressing the healthcare system crisis in this province. We are going to be fixing our schools, giving support to our kids. And most importantly, I think right now, we're going to be building truly affordable housing for people, getting back in the business of building housing like so many other provinces across this province have done for many years. We got to get back there, and that's what we're going to be doing. But I'm also saying to Ontarians, it's time. It's time for new leadership, new ideas, and a new government.
The NDP has historically relied on the support of organized labor. I think you had a call coming in there. I don't know what that sounds like.
I think it's CB24 trying to reach me.
Okay, well, they can hold on. We're not done just yet. You've relied on union support, right? Traditionally, labor, the NDP has made appeals to labor, but certainly Doug Ford and his government have really tried to muscle in on that turf, particularly with private sector unions. With the Protect Ontario slogan, with the threat from Donald Trump, explain to me how you see that dynamic, that fight for workers in Ontario.
Yeah, I think people see through that. I think working people see through that. People I'm hearing from when I go around the province, I'm on the plant floors, I'm at the mines. I was meeting with auto workers very recently. People see through that, right? They know that Doug Ford has never visited a picket line in his life, right? He's not out there for working people. And in fact, life has gotten a lot harder for working people in this province. And I think that when it comes down to it, people know that they can't count on him to fight for them. And that's what I think is why this election really at this time is maybe very important, right? Because who's really going to stand up for working people? I came to Ontario, 30 years ago from Newfoundland, right? And I came here because of opportunity. That is not the province of Ontario today. People are leaving this province. They are leaving the communities where they grew up. And we need to change things. And Doug Ford, he's not in it for the working people. He's made terrible deals that are costing people billions of dollars. And meanwhile, he's not actually creating jobs or opportunities. So I think it's going to come down to who can fight the hardest to protect working people in this province.
Okay, well, Marit Styles, is day one of the election campaign. You're clearly in demand, as the other call would suggest, so we'll let you go. Sorry, good luck. We'll talk to you throughout the election. That's Marit Styles, Ontario NDP leader. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So will tariffs be the ballot box question in Ontario? Let's bring back the power panel on that. Cameron Ahmad, Tim Powers, Jordan Leiknitz, and Sherelle Evelyn. Sherelle, I've seen foreign policy presidents, never really seen a foreign policy premier. I'm not sure with a 20-plus seat majority if it's really necessary to send a message to Donald Trump. Do you think Ontario voters are going to buy the reasons for going over a year early?
I mean, it's about as good a reason as any that Doug Ford might have put forward. I mean, never let a crisis, get in the way of a good political moment, because he knows that people are watching him. He's been gearing up. Really, he's been gearing up for this election since once it looked like Justin Trudeau was on the outs as prime minister. So whatever you can do to position yourself, like if you say one thing about Doug Ford is that he's turned out to be a really good politician.
Yeah.
He knows how to play the game, and that's what he has done from the moment he entered the Ontario PC leadership race. So whether it was Donald Trump, whether it was Justin Trudeau, whether it's Pierre Poilievre, there was always going to be something or somebody that Doug Ford would be able to jump off of and say, this is why I need to, get more votes. This is why I need to be in early. And he has been blessed with a weak opposition, so why not go?
Cameron, what are your thoughts on this? I remember in 2021 when the Liberals went early saying they needed a mandate to rebuild coming out of COVID. He's saying he needs a mandate to rebuild, I guess, coming out of Trump. What do you make of this move?
He is a very good politician, and I think it's a compelling message to the average person when all they're seeing and all they're following right now when they turn on the news, or even if they don't turn on the news, is Donald Trump and the impacts of his presidency on our country and on jobs and manufacturing in Ontario. So I think it sounds strong and it sounds compelling, but I don't know if, well, it's not a good reason objectively. We all know that. And I think the challenge for the other parties is whether they can demonstrate. You saw Bonnie Crombie trying to do that by saying, look, we need to focus on issues here that you actually have control over, that you're supposed to be fixing, like healthcare, which you're not. Here are the problems with your absence on these issues. Visually, her announcement, as Mike Crawley pointed out earlier, didn't really communicate that. So a lesson in political campaigns, that you have to communicate your message through very compelling visuals and through all of your events. But anyways, I think this could pan out for him. This also could backfire if the narrative manages to stick that this was an unnecessary election, because it wasn't, for him to be able to do what he's stating he wants to do. And if the narrative shifts to domestic issues that are within his control, that are not foreign policy, because it's not his that's not his purview as premier.
Right. So Jordan, if you're running an early election on the threat of tariffs, what if there are no tariffs on February 1 and then the next deadline is April, which is well after Ontarians vote? Or what if there are tariffs and the consequences of those tariffs are so severe it requires provincial government action and you're in caretaker mode and can't reconvene the legislature? I mean, I know you can do things for special warrants, but that kind of looks like putting a thumb on a scale in an election campaign.
I mean, I suspect Ford would go to bat for outcome rather than process in that case. Look, I think that, he's already been willing to tip his hand that he's going to be going down to Washington during the campaign, which is actually something that you normally would not see during the caretaker convention. Because obviously he doesn't do that as a candidate. He's doing that as premier. So I think he's shown some, let's say, flexibility in how he's interpreting that provision, which I would expect to continue if we were to have tariffs come in. But look, to pick up on what Cameron was saying, this is a totally very strategically smart but nakedly cynical move, right, on the part of the PCs provincially. Like, they just saw a window to go before Poilievre is potentially coming to power federally. Look, all governments have a risk of dying of old age, and I think that when you're sort of 7-8 years into your tenure, a lot of people in Ontario are going to be asking, is my life better today than it was 7 or 8 years ago? And I think for a lot of people, the answer is no. So for Ford, he has every incentive to keep his main opponent not Marit Styles, not Bonnie Crombie, but Trump. Now, if Stiles or Crombie are able to kind of pull away and bring to the fore other issues that we know that Ontarians are very concerned about, like housing, like healthcare, like our crumbling education system, well, then things could change. So this is a gamble that I think is very smart, but is not without risk.
Yeah, it's one thing he's putting in the window, right? Tim, your thoughts?
Yeah.
Well, look, I think hat manufacturers are benefited by the election, whether it be a toque or a ball cap. There you go. Fill your boots and put them on your heads. It's fascinating, though, in terms of Bonnie Crombie. I found it interesting, as we've all, I think, alluded to. Her announcement wasn't great, and her announcement, her main sort of campaign promise seems to be, I'm going to get everybody a family doctor in 4 years. That's almost audacious in its silliness, because I don't think the public believes that, given the slowness of the system. So at the same time she's criticizing Doug Ford and Marit's criticizing Doug Ford for an unnecessary election, she's making a promise that most people know will not get fulfilled. In the case of Doug Ford, why wouldn't he go now? There's one lesson in Ontario history, I think it's 1990, David Peterson. We're all too younger to remember that, of course, David, when Peterson went early and he got punished for it. Rarely do Canadians or provinces punish somebody for being a little politically advantageous, because guess what? They expect that's what happens in the sport. And I think Cam captured it well. Donald Trump, look, he eats up every show we've been on since he's been elected. He eats up every bit of oxygen. So why wouldn't the premier become that leech, so to speak, and try and suck some blood out of it like everybody else is doing?
Okay,
Did you like that metaphor?
Yeah, that's quite, well, I think you used like, so I think it's more of a simile. But there you go, that's my education.
Okay, yeah.